Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of RE365, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Tastes Like Chicken, written by SanctumWrites. Feck this job, Feck this ship, Feck this planet, and as throat was clear behind him, again, Feck this overgrown lizard in particular. It was hotter than hell in the summer, and this orange annoyance just refused to let him work, crouched in the burning dark grey sand, and up to his elbows in what had been their ship's engine, in peace.
"What are you doing? It is not supposed to be done like that."
"This is what needs to be done. Don't worry about it."
"This is not standard procedure."
"I know it's not. Just trust me. I know what I'm doing."
Subsection 3A, Chapter 42, clearly states that you require a titanium star driver, and at a minimum...
Darius didn't even turn around. He simply looked up and squinted into the distance. At first, he thought surviving the crash that killed nearly the entire crew had been a blessing. However, when he saw who had survived with him out of the 15 other on the ship, he was starting to question that. Because, as he searched the cloudless blue-screen sky trying to collect his thoughts, and convinced himself that jamming his fist into C's snout was not productive, it was beginning to feel more like he had done something terrible, and this was his punishment.
Darius!
Something really bad. Darius! Absolutely unforgivable. Darius! Had he bombed any orphanages lately? What? He finally stood and whipped around, staggering when his head swam with the movement, and his whole body ached with the effort. "What, C? What do you want now?" The large creature sat back on its haunches, the burned and melted remains of his blue crew uniform crunched with each movement.
"Do not take that tone with me, Darius,"
he hissed, a brilliant crimson neck full flaring with displeasure.
"Not only are you modifying the ship in an unauthorized manner, you know as well as I that Section 5, subsection B, paragraph 3 states that any modifications to a ship requires first the authorization of the head engineer, and then the captain."
He honestly didn't know. The most he had read of the employee handbook was the title, but to say that they did not have the time for this would be saying like the water was only a little wet. "Oh!" Darius pursed his lips and glanced at his reptilian companion with such a genuinely chastised expression that C's frills laid flat once more, mollified. Then his scuffled scales seemed to gleam with satisfaction.
"Yes!"
The brilliant amethyst eyes lazily narrowed into tolls and slits.
"You are breaking protocol."
"I'm so sorry." The smaller man stepped away from the remnants of the engine with only the briefest grimace of pain. "Why don't we go ask them, then?" Slow but sure-footed in the grey powdery sand that covered the landscape around them, he stalked over to where the bodies of the crewmen were laid out, side by side. He glanced at each one as he made his way to the end of the line, giving each a sort of a nod of respect. Darius hadn't known them long, but he didn't need to in order to feel some sort of, not sorrow, but something here. The memory of putting their mangled, twisted bodies, almost charred into anonymity, and still warm with the heat of the wreckage, was fresh in his mind. He didn't need to be a soft touch to know they didn't deserve to die like that. They had been decent folk, but he wasn't one to dwell on these things. He was just glad that it hadn't been him. When he finally came to the end of the line, he crouched down before his head engineer, grateful the smell was being blown downwind. The sand settled beneath his heels as Z followed with an air of uncertainty.
What are you doing?"
Darius glanced over his shoulder, dark-weathered face placid, before turning back to the ghoulish figure before him. "I'm asking the engineer. Hey, man, I can't remember your name. Chief Engineer, can I modify the engine? Oh, and I guess anything that I can get my hands on while we're at it." The silence wasn't really that surprising. He reached out and waved over the blackened face, as though he was simply trying to wake him up. "Can I? To let someone know where we are on this dusty hellhole?" When Darius leaned forward, the sweat on his close-cropped hair glistened in the daylight. All he heard was the whispers and sights of the sand sliding in the wind. Carefully finding his footing, he clapped Z on the shoulders, ignoring the delicate wince with an arched brow and a twitch of his lips. "Well, I didn't hear a no. Let's go ask the captain, I think he's in the middle." Z's ears were pointed back flat as he shifted his weight from side to side, teeth slightly bared.
"Darius," he murmured, "this is... I did not..."
The stocky man shook his head, cutting him off. No. You were right, we need to do this by the book, so let's go see the captain. You were on good terms with him, right? Knew him a while. He threw a long arm around the Yaktar's neck and drew C in close with a swift yank. With you here, he's sure to say yes. The sound of teeth clicking put Darius on edge as he dragged his companion along, but his smile never faltered. C stooped over, pulled to the shorter man's height, and huffed, sending cool air across his face in comparison to the desert around him.
No, I do not want to see Za. I do not want to see him like that again.
C tried to dig his heels in, but his feet couldn't find purchase in the sand. Darius continued to pull him along anyways, stumbling and resistant inch by inch until they stepped in front of his old friend's body. C stiffened as he resisted looking down, sliding an icy glare to Darius before staring into the sky.
I will not. Let me go.
The quiet brittle words hung between them for a moment, before the wind snatched them away for itself, leaving silence in exchange. They stood together while Darius studied C's profile as he continued to search the empty horizon, as though if he looked hard enough, he could erase everything that had happened. There was a squawk of surprise when Darius suddenly dropped to his knees. The arm that had never left Yaktar's neck tightened nearly to the point of pain as he dragged C down with him. His lips pursed into a grim parody of a smile as the sounds of hyperventilating began to fill the air, and brilliant gem-toned eyes searched his own in a panic. Don't look at me, the fiendish grin curled up even more. It's rude when you're asking someone for a favor. The least you can do is look them in the eye. C pushed harshly on his chest, claws drawing a bead of blood where they touched the skin through his ruined uniform. There was a jolt of movement before Darius adjusted, holding fast and reining him back in with a strength his appearance would not suggest. C continued to look for any sign that Darius would yield, but he gave nothing away. Be polite, came the demand through clenched teeth. There was no pleasure to be found in doing this to C, but he needed this. He needed to get it through his head that bitching about the rulebook would get them nowhere, because Darius didn't need to read it to know that it didn't cover the shit that they were in. There was a growl here, sharpened by outrage and the undercurrent of fear. Ask him, C. His nostrils flared and vertically slitted eyes drifted shut for a moment in return, before opening wide as he gazed upon the body of his oldest friend, snout wide and frozen in echoes of his final moments.
Do we have permission to modify the ship's captain, sir?
He finally asked in weary tones. He stared at him for a moment, entranced by the horror of it all. There was almost nothing left to the man Z had known. His azure eyes had boiled away, the brilliant greens of his scales scorched into the grey scale only age should bring. Za had seemed invincible, his blood brother, and now he laid before him, the god of his childhood victim to a mortal death. Z's breath came in shallow pants, struggling with the heat of the air, the heat in his memory as the flame ate flesh and cloth alike, before he finally ripped away from everything, shoving Darius in a fluid motion. They shot apart and landed hard in the sand with a heavy grunt from Darius, and the pained gasp as Z greedily tried to inhale the turquoise sky above him, the spell broken. Z laid on the ground, threading his way carefully past those all too fresh and terrible memories back to the present moment, before he slowly sat up, with a hurt air about him. Darius mirrored him, his movement delicate and slow as he observed him, rubbing his chest absent-mindedly. The wind brought the gift of silence once more, as both, whisking away the sounds of labored breathing, as both parties gathered their nerves.
But why did you do that, Darius?
C finally asked him quietly.
Why did you make me look at him like that again? You had no right.
Darius pulled his legs in to cross them, dragging a hand down his face and grimacing when it seemed to go with the movement so much easier than it had once did. Because I'm not sure you really get the situation that we're in. He was a good captain. I didn't want to see him like that either. He tipped his head to the side and tried to gnaw flame-chapped and blistered lips out of habit as he forgot himself. Pain bloomed and he swiped his tongue across his lips before speaking. See, how long can you do without water? The reptilian man leaned forward, hand sinking into the sand, a forked tongue flicking out to taste the air as he warily considered the question.
6 standard day units,
he bit out. Darius rolled his number around, his mouth forming a phantom words. Yeah, okay, so about 3 Earth days. And food?
12 standard days. 6 of yours, it would seem.
For once, the damned lizard was quiet and let Darius go on. Not bad, especially on the water. Do you want to know how many days I lost? I'm also 6 standard units on water. More if my food has it. As for eating, he patted a generous stomach. Age had an efficiency in his movements had given him. 63 standard days, more or less.
63? Z's eyes narrowed. Impressive.
Remember, it's give or take, Darius emphasized once more. And since we seem to be talking past each other a lot, let me speak plainly. His voice dropped lower as the friction of the dry air and his parched throat lent their strength to the sudden gust of wind to rob him of his words. He gestured for Z to come closer. Scaly shoulders hunched as he flicked his ear over his form. The pain still raw to see. He hesitated, but eventually crawled forward and stopped before him in a defensive crouch. Push comes to shove, if we end up being stuck here for a while, if we run out of little food and water we manage to scavenge from the wreck, you'll die first, by a long shot. And I can tell you that once you do, I'm going to take longer than 63 days for me to follow.
You know of where to find more food, and would keep that from me.
C didn't even sound surprised. He seemed resigned at the idea. Darius frowned for a moment at how little credit he was given, and dismissed it just as quickly. So long as they could work together, it didn't really matter what C thought of him. No, Darius said pleasantly, because once you're gone, I'll have about 75 kilograms of food. How much do you weigh anyways? Your planet has a similar gravity to mine, right? He asked, rubbing his chin in thought, the other tapping his knee. For a moment, C looked puzzled. It was a familiar expression to Darius by now. Before he pulled the best approximation of a scowl that snout would allow.
Darius, this is not the time for a joke. I'm done with this unproductive interaction with you. Your amusements are in poor taste, and this is not something I'll soon forget.
His voice was tight, laced with fury as he began to get up, searching for sure footing in the soft ground. When a flat remark stopped him, I wasn't kidding. His gaze bored into the human before him, and he fell to one knee. A strong wind swirling the fine sand into the sky.
You would consume another sentient? No.
The disgust was thicker than the disbelief.
No, a civilized sentient would sooner starve.
The careless shrug that he got in return made his blood run cold. Guess humans aren't civilized then, Darius said casually, because we have a name for eating other humans even. There was a rattle and a rasp to see his uniform once again as he shook his head in denial, as though he could fling the very idea of what Darius was saying from his mind if he did it hard enough.
You would not eat another of your species?
Cannibalism. We call it cannibalism. Whole communities were big on it in antiquity, he went on, talking over the other's babbling. I mean, it's been a no-go for many hundreds of years now, as a general rule, but you know, desperate times and desperate measures still happen. There was just the horrified choking as Z continued to stare in terror, and Darius pushed his hands into the sand, watching the tiny grains yield to the pressure. But generally, there is a sort of amazement and disgust at the idea of having to do that to survive. As distasteful as it is, for a lot of us, if the option is that or to starve, well... He glanced up from the sand meaningfully for a moment before returning to his preoccupation. We're very self-preserving and practical people. So at the end of the month, when you are cold and I am here alone, I'll be figuring out how to eat you. He sat back from the sand, satisfied, and finally looked up at sea, downright paralyzed, and still crouched in the sand like a cornered animal. Stop looking so hunted. I won't lay a finger on you. I don't have to. I'll be upset, of course. I consider you a talented, if not somewhat fucking annoying colleague. I've seen enough death here. I don't want to see yours. But in the end, that self-preservation I spoke of will win out. So, if we get picked up after that happens, we'll treat your body with the utmost respect. My government and press will talk of the ordeal with a morbid fascination, mourning your loss, and how I made the best of an absolutely terrible, he emphasized, situation. Your body, what's left of it anyways, will be hand-delivered to your family with my apologies, condolences for the enormity of the loss, and questions on how I can make this right. Trust me, it will be sincere. But behind closed doors, Darius got on hands and knees to crawl closer to Z, and he jerked back in a panic, sending himself staggering into the sand on his rear.
Come no closer,
he shouted, a clawed hand flung between them. Darius paused and sat back on his heels, with a sneer. as he continued to speak. When this is all said and done, when the public stops giving a shit, and the news gives up pretending it ever did, my people are going to pull me aside. They'll go through all the motions of saying how sorry they are about what happened. Last time, Darius leaned towards him, dark eyes wide, and sea shivered, swearing that he could see insanity swirling within them. Then, in the quiet, as they work up the nerve someone's going to speak, to just go for it and ask the question every last human in the galaxy's gonna want to know. The last words were spoken in a whisper, and carried on the wind, a casual question with the vilest of implications that left C numb. So, what did the poor bastard taste like? End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.